Welcome to the fourth read aloud. Play a short little song. Let's see, I've been starting with E minor a lot. I'm gonna stick with that because I've been working on that lately. So let's see. Okay, let's see where we were. I'm ready. I kind of liked singing to the dwarves songs, but I'm kind of looking forward to not singing today. So let's see where we were. On the table, in the light of a big lamp with a red shade, he spread a piece of parchment, rather like a map. This was made by Thror, your grandfather, Thorin, he said in answer to the dwarves' excited questions. It is a plan of the mountain. I don't see that this will help us much, said Thorin disappointedly after a glance. I remember the mountain well enough and the lands about it, and I know where Mirkwood is, and the weathered heath, where the great dragons bred. There is a dragon marked in red on the mountain, said Balin, but it will be easy enough to find him without that if we ever arrive there. There is one point that you haven't noticed, said the wizard, and that is this secret entrance. You see that rune on the west side and the hands pointing to it from the other runes? That marks a hidden passage to the lower halls. Look at the map at the beginning of this book and you'll see the rooms. I think we should do that. Let's see. Tolkien made some amazing maps. I really like Tolkien's maps. I think, is this, maybe this, here's one of the maps. I don't know if that's the one. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so this is what Gandalf is showing to the dwarves right now. Where were we? It may have been secret once, said Thorin, but how do we know that it is secret any longer? Old Smaug has lived there long enough now to find out anything there is to know about those caves. He may, but he can't have used it for years and years. Why? Because it's too small, 5 feet high, and the door 5 feet high the door, and 3 may walk abreast, says the runes. But Smaug could not creep into a hole that size, not even when he was a young dragon. Certainly not after devouring so many of the dwarves and men of Dale. It seems a great big hole to me, squeaked Bilbo, who had no experience of dragons and only of hobbit holes. He was getting excited and interested again, so that he forgot to keep his mouth shut. He loved maps, and in his hall there hung a large one of the county road with all his favorite walks marked on it in red ink. How could such a large door be kept secret from everybody outside, apart from the dragon, he asked. He was only a little hobbit, you must remember. In a lot of ways, said Gandalf. But in what way this one has been hidden, we don't know without going to see. From what it says on the map, I should guess there is a closed door which has been made to look exactly like the side of a mountain. That is the usual dwarves' method. I think that's it, right? Isn't it? Quite right, said Thorin. Also, went on Gandalf, I forgot to mention that with the map went a key, a small and curious key. Here it is, he said, and handed to Thorin a key with a long barrel and intricate wards made of silver. Keep it safe. Indeed I will, said Thorin, and he fastened it upon a fine chain that hung about his neck and under his jacket. Now things began to look more hopeful. This news alters them much for the better. So far, we have had no clear idea what to do. We thought of going east as quiet and as careful as we could as far as the Long Lake. After that, the trouble would begin. A long time before that, if I know anything about the roads east, interrupted Gandalf. We might go from there up along the running river, went on Thorin, taking no notice, and so to the ruins of Dale, the old town in the valley there, under the shadow of the mountain. But none of us liked the idea of the front gate. The river runs right out of it through the great cliffs at the south of the mountain, and out of it comes the dragon too, far too often unless he has changed his habits. That would be no good, said the wizard, not without a mighty warrior, even a hero. He capitalized hero. That's kind of cool. I tried to find one, but warriors are too busy fighting one another in distant lands, and in this neighborhood, heroes are scarce, or simply not to be found. Swords in these parts are mostly blunt, and axes are used for trees, and shields as cradles or dish covers. And the dragons are comfortably far off, and therefore legendary. That is why I settled on burglary, especially when I remembered the existence of a side door. And here is our little Bilbo Baggins, the burglar, the chosen and selected burglar. So now let's get on and make some plans. Very well then, said Dorn, supposing the burglar expert gives us some ideas or suggestions. He turned with mock politeness to Bilbo. First, I should like to know a bit more about things, said he, feeling all confused and a bit shaky inside, but so far still tookishly determined to go on with things. I mean about gold and the dragon and all of that, and how it got there, and who it belongs to, and so on and further. Bless me, said Thorin. Haven't you got a map? And didn't you hear our song? And haven't we been talking about all of this for hours? All the same, I should like it plain and clear, he said, obstinately, putting on his business manner, usually reserved for people who tried to borrow money off him, and in doing his best to appear wise and prudent and professional and live up to Gandalf's recommendation. Also, I should like to know about risks, out-of-pocket expenses, time required, and remuneration, and so forth, by which he meant, what am I going to get out of it, and am I going to come back alive? Oh, very well, said Thorin. Long ago, in my grandfather Thror's time, our family was driven out of the far north and came back with all their wealth and their tools to this mountain on the map. It had been discovered by my far ancestor Thrain the Old, but now they mined and tunneled, and they made hunger halls and greater workshops. And in addition, I believe they found a good deal of gold and a great many jewels too. Anyway, they grew immensely rich and famous. My grandfather was king under the mountain again, and treated with great reverence by the mortal men who lived to the south and were gradually spreading up the running river as far as the valley overshadowed by the mountain. They built the merry town of Dale there in those days. Kings used to send for our smiths and reward even the least skillful most richly. Fathers would beg us to take their sons as apprentices and pay us handsomely, especially in food supplies, which we never bothered to grow or find for ourselves. Altogether, those were good days for us, and the poorest of us had money to spend and to lend, and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it. Not to speak of the most marvelous and magical toys, the like of which is not to be found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armor and jewels and carvings and cups, and the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the north. Undoubtedly, that was what brought the dragon. Dragons steal gold and jewels, you know, from men and elves and dwarves wherever they can find them, and they guard their plunder as long as they live, which is practically forever unless they are killed, and never enjoy a brass ring of it. Indeed, they hardly know a good bit of work from bad. Usually they just have a good notion of the current market value, and they can't make a thing for themselves, not even mend a little loose scale of their armor. There were lots of dragons in the north in those days, and gold was probably getting scarce up there, with the dwarves flying south or getting killed, and all the general waste and destruction that dragons make going from bad to worse. There was a most specially greedy, strong, and wicked worm called Smaug. One day he flew up into the air and came south. The first we heard of it was a noise like a hurricane coming from the north, and the pine trees on the mountain creaking and cracking in the wind. Some of the dwarves who happened to be outside, I was one, luckily, a fine adventurous lad in those days, always wandering about, and it saved my life that day. Well, from a good way off, we saw the dragon settle on our mountain in a spout of flame, and then he came down the slopes, and when he reached the woods, they all went up in fire. By the time all the bells were ringing in Dale and the warriors were arming, the dwarves rushed out of their great gate, but there was a dragon waiting for them. None escaped that way. The river rushed up in steam, and a fog fell on Dale, and in the fog the dragon came on them and destroyed most of the warriors. The usual unhappy story. It was only too common in those days. And then he went back and crept in through the front gate and routed out all the halls and lanes and tunnels, alleys, cellars, mansions, and passages. After that, there were no dwarves left alive inside, and he took all the wealth for himself. Probably, for that is the dragon's way, he has it all piled up in a great heap far inside and sleeps on it for a bed. Later, he used to crawl out of the gate and come by night to Dale and carry away people, especially maidens, to eat, until Dale was ruined and all the people dead or gone. What goes on there now I do not know for certain, but I don't suppose anyone lives nearer to the mountain than the far edge of the long lake nowadays. nowadays. The few of us who were well outside sat and wept in hiding and cursed Smog, and there were unexpectedly joined by my father and my grandfather with singed beards. They looked very grim, but they said very little. When I asked how they had got away, they told me to hold my tongue and said that one day, in the proper time, I should know. After that, we went away, and we had to earn our livings as best we could up and down the lands, often sinking as low as blacksmith work or even coal mining. But we have never forgotten our stolen treasure, and even now, when I will allow we have a good bit laid by and are not so badly off, here Thorin stroked the gold chain around his neck, we still mean to get it back and to bring our curses home to Smog, if we can. Okay, we're going to stop there, guys. See ya.